Why are things in general, some things are visible and some things are invisible? For instance, subatomic particles, atoms themselves, and definitely subatomic particles are invisible. We don't even have instruments, the most powerful microscopes that can see them. You can see their effects, their impact, but they remain invisible. In school, we would get that image of like a bunch of grapes, which consist of protons, neutrons, and electrons. But that was just an image for us to be able to work with. It wasn't because anyone saw it that way. DNA, subcellular structures, that very makeup of existence, the very building blocks, are all invisible. So, I don't know if you've ever asked yourself the question why. You could say, hey, some things are bigger, some things are smaller. And after all, size doesn't matter. That's what we know today. One follicle of a hair can produce through nuclear fission and fusion more energy than all the tanks and all the weapons, artillery of the greatest armies. But why are things visible then and why are things not visible? Scientists have grappled with this question. And nobody really has a complete theory on this, one that really works. Yeah, you could say that when molecules fuse together, and if the right ones, it turns something that we can experience on a macroscopic level, which means we can experience with our five senses. You can see it, you can hear it, you can taste, touch, or smell it. When things are not quite on that level, you have to experience it in a different way. But that really cuts to the point of what exactly is reality. Because interestingly, you can argue that the more you experience it in a tangible way, the less real it is. What do I mean by less real? Not that it's an illusion, but it means it's not the real root building blocks of that particular item. So whether you look at water or fire, or any other of the visible experiences in life, entities, phenomenon, they're all made up of elements, which in turn are made up of molecules, which in turn are made up of atoms, which in turn are made up of subatomic particles, sub-subatomic, and who knows how deep down the rabbit hole you go. But the deeper you go, the less tangible, the less physical, the less concrete. Why is that the case? Why wouldn't it be the reverse? That the real subcellular, subatomic structure should be visible, and the superficial should be invisible. And what does it tell us about our own empirical experiences in life? So I think it would be good to think out of the box, to just perhaps, let's experiment a moment in the way our mind works. Just because we experience something doesn't mean that that's the full reality of that experience. Which means, simply put, if I asked you, what does the horizon look like? The answer is going to be based on where you're standing. If I ask it to you right now, you look out the window, or if you're outside, you'll say one answer. If you're on top of a mountain, it'll be a different answer. If you're in a valley, it's another answer. If you're middle of the mountain, it's a fourth answer. So in other words, it's all dependent on perspective. There's no one objective answer. What does the horizon look like? Basically, you climb the mountain, the horizon widens and expands. What makes you tick? I created a course called Discover Your Spiritual DNA. It gives you an X-ray of your psyche, of your soul. Check it out in the description below. You read about the astronauts that landed on the moon or went to outer space and they saw Earth for the first time. It was awesome. They never saw that context and that perspective. So much about life is not about us objectively knowing what is happening. It's us experiencing something a certain way. Talk about a soul's eternal journey. So I was always lacking words when people would ask me, where does a soul go to after it passes on? But then I was thinking about it and I said, imagine a conversation, a dialogue between a refrigerator and electricity. And the refrigerator asks the electricity, where do you go to when they pull the plug. And the electricity responds with incredulousness. What's the chutzpah? What nerve do you have to ask that question? You're a little box they just invented in the last century or two. You think now you're the center of the universe? You ask me where I go? I go back to the place before they discovered you, before they invented you, before they learned to generate and bottle or contain electricity in a box called a refrigerator. I go back to a place that's beyond time and space as you would understand it. And when you think about it, of course, same question. Where does the soul go to? That's based on the premise that we are where it's at. This is the center of everything right here. So where does the soul go? But perhaps we're not the center of it all. There's much more. There's a bigger picture. And like electricity, the soul goes back to its natural place before it was contained in this physical body, in this leg of the journey, and it continues the journey. It's in other dimensions. No different than when you ask electricity or energy, that when you burn a piece of wood in the fireplace, where does the wood go? So the wood breaks down, but it turns into gas, it turns into warmth, it turns into fire. Heat water, turns into gas. Freeze it, it turns into ice. So different states of the same entity can go through many stages. Some of them are visible, some are not. Once it turns into gas, we won't be able to recognize it. We know today matter equals energy. E equals mc squared. And therefore you can never really destroy matter. So the fact that you take an object and you destroy it, you just turned it into another form. So this is critical in understanding reality in general. So the search for reality, I would say, is not a static one. It's not one perception. It's a journey. We begin with our senses. What I see, what I hear, what I taste, I touch, and I smell. And then when you ask yourself, is there anything more? Absolutely. There are ideas. You can't see or hear them or taste or touch or smell them. You can sense them in some way, but there's no way to measure them. You have emotions and feelings. Love. You just need different instruments. Reminds me of Sir Arthur Eddington's example when asked, how do you come up with all these bizarre conclusions in the 20s and the 30s about quantum mechanics, subatomic particles? To the point that they began to see that the world there is an indeterministic one, a world of probabilities, where things are not defined. And you cannot, not because of lack of data or information, but you fundamentally can't define a certain thing in that stage until you measure it, until you observe it. And he gave the example of a fisherman who spread his net across all the 7 seas and began to collect and gather all the fish in the seas. And he came to a great conclusion as he documented the types of fish, the species, the color, the shape, the size. There are no fish in the sea shorter than a ½ inch long. Interesting. We all know there are smaller fish than that. And then what do? We look at his net, look at his instrument. The net has spaces, of ½ inch spaces. So of course, all the fish smaller than a ½ inch fell back into the water. So his big conclusion should have said, when you use a net with ½ inch spaces, you're never going to catch fish that are shorter than a ½ inch space. Shorter than a ½ inch. But you don't need a scientist for that. The same thing. If you're going to look at a horizon from a valley, it's going to look like one thing. If you look at a horizon from the top of Mount Everest, it's going to look very differently. So the first thing is we need to look at ourselves first before we talk about outside realities. Talk about empirical evidence. Empirical evidence is subjective to the person who's doing the empiricalizing. I don't know if that's a word. The person that's doing the observing, and what instruments are they using? Now, with that in mind, I think we can understand why God is invisible. But in truth is, as we'll discover, invisible doesn't mean it's invisible. Just because you can't see subatomic particles or you can't see love doesn't make it invisible. You could say it's invisible to the net, the instruments called eyes of flesh and blood. So we have to really define visible and invisible. You can argue that atoms are far more visible than matter that we can't see. Depends what you define by visible. If you mean visible physical vision, So physical vision, like the refrigerator, can only see what it can see. As a matter of fact, you could argue that visibility, what we recognize as visibility, is limited vision. Just like consciousness is limited consciousness. The supraconscious, what some call unconscious, subconscious, is actually far wider and more vast than the conscious. The conscious ideas that come into your mind are limited perception. That's why you can contain them. If they flow too quickly from the supraconscious or the collective unconscious, whatever word you give for it, so it would be like a reservoir that has no filters and no regulators and no faucets. It would flood and destroy. In a sense, that's what true madness is. That's why there's a thin line between madness and genius. So it's not just what's flowing, is making sure the flow is regulated. If it starts pouring rain to the point of a flood, it will destroy the fields just like a drought. The key to rain is drop by drop. The same thing, intelligence, consciousness. So our conscious perception of things, our conscious senses are actually limited. That's why we can contain them. If it would come too quickly, it would overwhelm us. We would not be able to remain sane. So sanity, you can say, is limited awareness. I know it sounds strange, but that's what it is. We can't live in the world of the insane, the world of madness, in a world where there are no boundaries, in a world where there are no compartments. It's necessary. Imagine a person who has trauma, a loss, a death, and they wouldn't be able to compartmentalize, and at some time the memory fades so they can live. If they're always living in the moment of shock and trauma, it wouldn't be called PTSD. Post-trauma, it would be constant trauma. But our minds have a way of compartmentalizing, putting it in a closet. It doesn't mean you can't retrieve it. But it's vital that we have compartmentalization in a structured world. But as William Blake said, when you cleanse the doors of perception, what do you find? The infinite, the oneness, the singularity. Everything is infinite. We cannot live in that world of infinite. We can aspire to it. We can dream about it. We can seek transcendence. But we need to some way bottle the infinite in the finite. Using another William Blake's statement, his beautiful poem. He says, to see a world in a grain of sand, a heaven in a wildflower, I should say. To hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. We need the hour. We need the hand. We need the sand. We need the flower. But in it, you can see the infinite. So let's go back to visibility and invisible. When Moses asked God, let me see your face, it was a voice of intimacy. It's like when you love someone, I want to see you. I want to see you in your full glory. I don't want to see you just in garments, covered up, limited. And God responds, no man can see me and live. Because if you see me, you are me. And then you won't be you. You'll be burned up, you'll be absorbed, you'll be dissolved in a higher consciousness. But the interesting thing is, when you read it closely, God is really saying, if you want to see me, don't look. Don't look on your terms. Allow yourself to suspend yourself. Allow me in that way. And then you can see me. In other words, by not looking, you see me. What does that mean? That if you want to perceive the invisible, you have to get yourself out of the way, because yourself has that limited perception. You have your net, the way you see the horizon. And the me, and our parameters are limited. So indeed, it would make no sense if God was visible. If God was visible, it wouldn't be God. It would be something, a construct that we can relate to. That's the antithesis of what God truly means. A true reality, absolute reality. Something that is beyond everything is by definition defies the senses. Can the senses have some taste of it? Just like when you listen to music, you're hearing the sounds, but the experience is far beyond just the sum total of the sounds. And that's what Abraham, when he was seeking God, came to realize. First, he did it through process of elimination. Well, he always did it through process of elimination. He said, it can't be those idols that my father was manufacturing. That's for sure not. Maybe it's nature. Pantheism, maybe nature, and he looked around the beauty of nature, the sun, the moon. But he realized that was just another extension of material existence. Yes, sublime, beautiful, poetic, romantic, but still part of a reality that was too close to us. And as he continued his journey, he continued the process of elimination and realizing, I am looking for the whole reality. I'm just a piece of reality. I'm just a refrigerator. The refrigerator shouldn't define the part doesn't define the whole should define the part. And he realized, for me to experiencing the divine, to experience the magic of the divine, the grandeur, the majesty, I need to suspend myself and just let it enter. Just like when you stand in front of a beautiful, a beautiful piece of art, or a beautiful act of nature. You stand in awe. You don't try to contain it. You try to be contained by it. You try to be absorbed by it. You're listening to music. Get yourself out of the way. The subject should melt into the object. You're reading a book and you get so absorbed you don't even realize you're turning the pages. That's when you're in the zone. That's when the fish becomes part of the water. You're not experiencing it, you are it. It's a state of being. I'm going to ask you, what does life feel like? What does it feel like to be alive? If you have an answer, you probably need to see a doctor. Because the sensation of life shouldn't feel like anything. You shouldn't feel your blood pumping through your veins. Yes, when you're running and then the heartbeat goes up. But if you feel a thud, you feel dull, you feel sharp pain, or even if it's not pain, as soon as you feel something, it means it's not seamless. Consciousness is an experience of two things, I and what I'm feeling. So really a healthy life, I don't feel anything. What is your left leg doing right now? The second before I asked you the question, you weren't thinking about it. That doesn't mean that your left leg wasn't there, or right leg for that matter. It means you weren't thinking about it. It doesn't mean, just because you're not aware of it, consciously aware, doesn't mean it's not there. So invisible is a very, it can be a very, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for the word like distortion. A very manipulative word even. It's not the word I'm looking for. I'm sorry, I just can't find the word. Maybe because it's invisible. It's a very deceptive word. That's the word I was looking for. What does it mean? Invisible. That you don't know it's there, that you don't feel it, that you don't see it. So the things that are most real is when you know you exist and you don't even have to feel it. You're just there. Life when you're living, you know that that's what life is like. Go explain colors to a person that can't see a color. So the point is, it's not that God needs to be invisible. It's that the whole concept that we think visibility is the only way to measure things is limited. And that's what Abraham and all the seekers, they were not looking for a God that's a product of our empirical evidence. I don't want a God that's a result of a mathematical equation, of a rational process, because the rational process itself is also only a piece of reality. If there is a God, the rational mind was also created by God. So is the part going to dictate the whole? It's an experience that transcends the senses. So you'll say, so how do we know it exists? Well, it ultimately comes down through experience, just as we know subatomic particles exist. Not because you see them, you see their effect. And obviously, in this case, it's far deeper than that. I would say the problem most of us have with God, by the way, is not because it's visible or invisible. It's because the way God was presented to us is a distortion or even a complete sham. Like Nietzsche wrote, God is dead. He said that God didn't deserve to be alive. We got the wrong God. Or as Levi Yitzchak Berditchever said to a self-proclaimed atheist, the God you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. Today we're comfortable with the invisible. Just look at your smartphone. You're listening to me speak. I'm not sitting in the same room with you. You see my face or hear me, wherever you may be. What's connecting us? It's not wires. There's something in the ether, or today we don't use that word anymore. There's something that's beyond time and space as we know that can transcend time and space. I don't know if we fully understand it. We know it works, and we know how to build technologies around it. God is not the ultimate of invisible, but the ultimate of reality, and therefore something that's not contained by boxes and senses and perceptions and the doors of perception that we are so accustomed to. So it's really an exercise to getting out of your comfort zone and experiencing something beyond you. That's why it's so equated with love, equated with all the mysteries of life. Why is it mysterious? Not because it's mysterious, it's because it's strange to us. But those that become comfortable with the paradox, that become comfortable with the mystery, that's the nature. The true nature of life is mystery, is paradox. And there's nothing strange about that. It's only strange when you limit yourself to the terms where these are contradictions. This fits in this box, it can't be aligned with that box. That's really the journey to find a higher reality, the essence of it all, and beyond the essence. And the visible universe is a taste, is like the palm of your hand, the grain of sand, where we can have a handle to hold on to, somewhat experience that which is beyond our hand. Yes, indeed, to find the infinite within the finite. And that's ultimately the goal in life, is to take this material world, recognize it for what it is, a container. It's a container to be able to contain even that which is not containable, to express the inexpressible, where the invisible becomes visible, and the visible recognizes that it's just the tip of the iceberg of a far, far greater reality. And that's how we bridge it, by being a kind person, by being a gentle person, by bringing light into this world, and recognizing this is not the center of it all. It's the center of it all if you channel the higher reality into this world, but it's not the center of it all if you think all there is this. I'd love to hear thoughts, feedback on this important topic. So Simon Jacobson, Meaningful Life Center, meaningfullife.com. Remember, you carry the infinite within you. Express it, and ultimately the expression is through love. Love another person is the way we see the face of God. Love your feedback, your questions, your thoughts, and please share it with others. Again, meaningfullife.com, where you can find this and many other programs. And above all, let us all join together, each in our unique way, and create this cosmic symphony of beauty and magic and music. Thank you so much.